Coming here with this law stuff can't be very interesting.
I haven't.
Has received. My name is Carl Brenner. I'm the Executive Symposium Editor for the Utah Law Review. I want to say a little bit about the Law Review before I introduce our keynote. So the Utah Law Review was founded in 1948 with the purpose of serving the interests of students, the bench, and the bars of the state and surrounding areas. Since then, our scope has expanded to expand legal issues of importance domestically and internationally. To accommodate kind of our expanded scope, we have added on an online publication to focus on issues that are more specific to Utah, the OnLaw, and that accepts articles from Utah practitioners as well as scholars that are accessible and applicable specifically to Utah. Since 1964, the Law Review Symposium issues have included topics ranging from segregation to antitrust to adoption, pollution, many more. I, of course, would be remiss to not take the opportunity to again thank Professors Schwartz and Reinhardt for their tireless work in organizing the symposium with me. As well as Miriam Lovin and Dana Wilson, who work in our events coordination office, and Sarah Parker, the editor-in-chief of our Law Review this year, for all of her support. The professor's vision for the symposium this year was an obvious choice when it was presented to the Law Review staff. They were selected by a pretty handy majority. And not only has the topic proven to be interesting, but it has proven to be extremely timely. Just this morning, I think we'll probably discuss a little bit later at our next securities focus panel, the SEC took a vote on the new crowdfunding rules under Title III. And there's no doubt that all of the issues discussed today here will have an impact on how those rules are interpreted. So now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jonathan Johnson. Mr. Johnson is a business builder, a BYU law graduate, chairman of the board of Overstock.com, and he says, most importantly, husband of Courtney Johnson and a father of 5 sons. In 2002, Jonathan joined Overstock.com to head its legal department, where within 3 months he became the 5th member of the company's executive team. Since then, he's held various roles, including president for 5 years and acting CEO. In 2014, he became chairman of the board, and his leadership has significantly contributed to Overstock's remarkable growth from a startup to an international business with over $1.5 billion in annual sales. Overstock successfully runs on very slim gross margins, only about 18%, selling quality products and effectively keeping costs low by following the motto, we save paper clips. In the business community, Jonathan has been recognized by the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce as a chamber champion, by Utah Business Magazine as Sustainable Business Award winner for leadership on corporate sustainability, and by the Utah Technology Council as Trustee of the Year for leadership on public policy issues. Jonathan serves on various charitable and community boards, including the Board of Governors for the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, University of Utah Hospital Foundation, the Utah Technology Council, and is the founding chairman of the Salt Lake Chamber Clean Air Task Force in Utah. He also created the Right to Try Foundation to help provide terminally ill patients aid in seeking new medicines. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Jonathan.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. Carl, thank you for that generous introduction. I'll need to make sure my PR people cut that down. It sounded like I was applying for a job or something. Thank you for having me here. As you heard in my introduction, I bleed blue. And so I know I come with one strike against me. And for that, I apologize. But I love to be at the U. And this is the first time I've been to the new law school building. I've taught several times next door at the old building and frequently asked to come to the Eccles School. So it's good to be here today. I have prepared relatively short remarks because I'm hoping to answer questions of things that might be of interest to you. I find that when a speaker talks about something that the listeners want to hear, it's much more entertaining for the listeners. And if the speaker just talks about what he wants to say, it may or may not be entertaining for the listeners. So if during the presentation you have a question, I would rather you raise your hand and ask it then rather than wait till the end. But I wanted to talk today on this topic, does a law degree hinder or help a business career? And to give you the punchline up front, I think it helps a business career. But we'll talk about why and what some of the things, maybe the hurdles to make sure it doesn't hinder it. So as an organized ex-journal person at a law school, I have a table of contents. I'm going to talk about my history, what I think is the ideal of the general counsel role, and how that might help shift into a business career from the legal suite. In-house counsel practice, and what skills a good in-house lawyer has that translate into being a business person. And then whether one should move to business from a legal profession. And frankly, for me, that was a very difficult decision. I had spent, like everyone else has been to law school, a lot of years trying to get into school, going to school, studying for bars in different states, passing bars. That sheepskin on my wall was part of my personality, part of who I was. And so moving away from that came with, I guess, some internal conflict I want to talk about. So that's kind of the outline. But again, anytime you have a question about anything, let me know. So I graduated in 1993 and clerked for the Utah Court of Appeals, clerked for Judge Russin, and had the very good fortune of about a third of the way through my clerkship, a spot opened on the Supreme Court, State Supreme Court. Judge Russin applied for it. I was involved in the application. Clerks do a lot of writing on a lot of things, and was able to follow his coattails up to the State Supreme Court. And so I did that for a year. And then I moved back to Los Angeles, where I was from, and for about 5 years I practiced at two different firms. Did M&A work for a firm called Graham & James, which was about a 400 to 500 attorney firm. Did mostly work for Japanese clients. And I mention that because in the late 80s and early 90s, mid 90s, the Japanese went from taking over the world to buying Pebble Beach and Rockefeller Center to disposing of their assets on the successful buy high, sell low theory of investment. And so I did a lot of, did some acquisition work, but also a lot of disposition work, selling properties for the Japanese. But they were an interesting type of client because they were very sophisticated in business, but not always very sophisticated in the way that Americans did business. And so even as a young corporate attorney, I got used to doing a lot of hand-holding for the client, the business leaders, in helping them understand how Americans did business. It also gave me a chance to see a lot of different leadership styles that have frankly helped me in my career transitioning from the law to business. And I'll share one example there. When I was a wet behind the ears, still first year associate, one of the clients I was working for was Bandai, which is the largest toy manufacturer in Japan. And in the mid-90s, their largest product, their largest character was the Power Rangers. And so I represented the Power Rangers all the time. And when my young son, Jonathan IV, heir to the throne, I'm not sure what that throne is, but when Jonathan was in preschool, he said, "Dad, what do you do when you go to work?" And I said, "Well, when the Power Rangers can't win their battles, they come to your dad." That very next day, when my wife Courtney was picking Jonathan up, the teacher pulled him aside and said, "Your son's talking crazy." And she said, no, that's what his dad does. So, but as a young, wet behind the ears attorney, one of my first assignments that I got to do unsupervised was to go negotiate a license deal with an underwear company that wanted to put the Red Ranger and the Pink Ranger and the other Power Rangers on t-shirts and briefs. And in that negotiation, Bandai, my client, was the 800-pound gorilla, and the underwear company was there begging for a license. So I'd sat down with my business counterpart, a fellow from Japan, and we talked about what issues were important in this license agreement so I could go and negotiate the agreement. You know, somewhere 8 to 10 things that were important. I went and negotiated, came back to the client, and very proud of myself, said, "We've got a great deal." And I went through all 8 to 10 points, and we had won on every point. It was a very good license, from my perspective, for Bandai. And this Japanese businessman said to me, "Jonathan, that's not a good deal." And I was kind of taken aback because we'd gotten everything. And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? What more could we have gotten?" And he said, "This is a great deal for us for 1 year. And then that underwear company will be out of business. And we will be looking for, because it's too rich a deal for us and poor a deal for them, we'll be looking for another company to license to sell underwear for us." So tail between my legs, I went back to my office, called opposing counsel, and said, "I'm sorry, the client can't sign this license." And they said, "Well, we don't have anything else to give." And I said, "You're going to be doing all the getting." But that's when I learned that a good deal is a win-win deal. That if Bandai and the underwear company could make business or make money, then we had a good deal. And that's been something that's been crucial to how we run Overstock. If our suppliers and our customers and Overstock can't all be getting a good deal, there's not business to be done there. So I think that's one of the things that I learned as a young attorney that's translated into being translated into going into business. So anyway, I practiced law for 5 years in big firms, and then moved to Salt Lake, to Draper, to work for a small software startup called Tenfold. And if anyone had told me in 1984, when I was a freshman in college, that I would someday be working in Draper, I would have thought I was either a farmer, pumping gas, or working at the prison. But we've seen how technology has changed Utah, and particularly that south end of the valley and the north end of Utah County. Tenfold was an interesting place to work. I joined as the number 2 lawyer. We had a general counsel who was a licensing expert, and I wanted to learn how to be a better software licensor. But I had brought a skill set that he didn't have. I was an SEC attorney. I knew how to do filings for public companies, and we were filing our S1, and we soon went public. That company expanded in the internet bubble, and then contracted is too soft a word, popped when the internet bubble popped. And I became the general counsel And 2 weeks after becoming the general counsel, we had been sued by 9 of our biggest clients. And these were kind of $5 to $25 million software licenses. They were significant. We had a shareholder class action suit filed against us. We had an SEC investigation to start. And I would say what I learned there was crucial to being a better business person when I came to Overstock was the refiner's fire of difficult times. Frankly, I think you learn the most when times are hard. And everything from figuring out how to save pennies by shutting down offices. A lot more of the business began reporting to me. And at one point, our board came to me and said, Jonathan, we would like you to be the CFO. You're doing most of the CFO work. You're negotiating our covenants with the banks. You're getting us out of the leases and 14 offices we have around the country. Investor relations, you're doing most of that because they're concerned with all this law stuff that's going on. And I said, I can't do it. I don't want to be the CFO. I am a lawyer. And I turned them down once, twice, and then the third time they came, they said, we want you to talk to the CFO at Marriott Corporation. He's a former general counsel. He's made the move. Talk to him because we want you to be the CFO. And so I did, and he got me comfortable that by giving up the general counsel title and moving away from the law, that I wasn't turning my back on all of my education. And I became the CFO and did that for a time. And then in 2002, met Patrick Byrne. Patrick Byrne is the founder and CEO of Overstock. In 2002, the company was around for about 3 years. It had just gone public. Think about going public in 2002 as a .com. It was very unique. We had about 50 people and we did about 50 million in sales. And I was hired to be the legal department of one. I would not recommend being a department of one ever. Hard to take weekends off, hard to not do things at night, hard to go on vacation. But the good news is you're involved in almost everything the company does. And so I joined Overstock, and I'll talk more about kind of that part of the career as I go on. But I wanted to give you a sense of my history so you could kind of see where I was. So the ideal of the general counsel role, I view the in-house counsel, the general counsel, as a lawyer statesman. It is a unique job among executives at a company. It's the person that has to say no when no is hard to say. It's the person who should always be finding a way to say yes. But there are 3 characteristics, I think, of the lawyer statesman, all of which help translate into becoming a business person if that's of interest. First, a general counsel has to be an acute technician. The old joke about general counsel that we're all a mile wide and an inch deep is kind of true, but not so much. Not so much. You have to be an acute technician about many areas of the law that your business is touching. You know, the obvious ones that I think go for every business will be HR issues, will be accounting issues, security issues, but depending on what your business is, you're going to have to get pretty deep in a lot of issues. At Overstock, we have advertising issues, we have patent issues, we have patent troll issues that we were talking about over lunch, and I'm sure there's mixed views on whether that term is an accurate term or a pejorative term among this group. But you have to be an acute technician. The second thing you have to be as a general counsel in that lawyer statesman role is a wise counselor. I don't think that management or the board of directors or even other people coming to you in the company always just want a legal answer. What they want is someone who can give wise counsel. And I think being in law school and learning to think like a lawyer, I don't know if that's part of the things that gets pounded in here at the Quinney Law School, but at the J. Reuben Clark Law School, that was just pounded in like crazy. And I'm never quite sure what it meant until then I was out among folks who weren't lawyers. And being a wise counselor, being a problem solver, being a problem seer so that they can be solved before they happen is part of what being a lawyer statesman is. The next thing that a lawyer statesman is a leader. And it is really interesting. When you join just about any organization, whether it's a community organization or the business you're working at as a lawyer, I think you're looked at just a little differently. And I think if you use that carefully, you can become a leader in the organization. And I think that's part of what the benefit of going to law school is. You can be a leader and help solve problems. You're kind of naturally respected by both title and status. So, next, in-house counsel practice. I'm going to talk about 5 things here that I think are important to lawyers, particularly in-house, and talk about how each one of them makes the transition to being a business person or an entrepreneur easier. First, as an in-house attorney, you have one client. Now, it may not always feel like you have one client. Your CEO may feel like he's the client, or the president may demand that she's the client, and all the executives want to be the client, or the board of directors may think they're the client. But you have one client, and it's the company. And it's important to understand that and understand how the company works. And that creates a big breadth of practice. And the more you know about your client, the better position you are to help your client and ultimately to move to be a business leader and a business executive within the client. As the general counsel, I touched all areas of the business. And so when the request came to me to hire another general counsel and to put on a business hat when I was at Overstock, I didn't have to think twice about the offer that time. I'd made that transition once, I understood the business, and I was eager to do it. Now, did that mean that I was a merchant or a marketer or an IT person or a warehouse, a logistics person? No. A customer service expert? No, I was none of those. But I knew kind of how all of those pieces of the business worked and fit together. So I think having one client helps you morph to business fairly easily. Second, an in-house lawyer cannot be Dr. No. In law school, I think we get risk aversion beat out of us. We want to be on the right side all the time. And I was talking to my younger brother, Ben, who's works at Goldman Sachs back in New York, and I was just saying, Ben, you know, I'm just more risk averse than you. And Ben said to me, well, that's true, Johnny, but it also means that you're more profit averse than I am. And I think that's true. And I think if you're going to make a morph from the law to business, you have to somehow get over being risk averse. And you can't say no to everything. In fact, even if you're a lawyer and you say no to everything, you're not going to have a job for a very long time because no one wants to hear no. You got to have recommendations. You have to involve the business people. See what other avenues there are to getting something done that don't go through an illegal door or don't go through a high-risk door. I think you have to be a problem solver. And that can come up in litigation. And lawyers are trained to litigate and fight. But sometimes the best thing to do in litigation is to find a business deal with the opposing side. And maybe we can license you some software or a patent, or there are a lot of ways to do it. You'll be involved in business structures. You know, the tax lawyer will frequently say no. unless he or she is creative and then can find a way to structure the business. So you can't be Dr. No. And as you learn the business and have recommendations, I think it makes for a good transition to a business career. One thing that a lawyer will be involved in a business is crisis management. Anytime something bad happens and there's a small group of people huddled in a conference room or the CEO's office, the general counsel is likely to be there. It could be bet the company litigation. It could be a government investigation. It could be a whistleblower that's submitted something to your HR people. It could be corruption in manufacturing over in Asia. It could be a PR issue. All those things, you're going to be in the thick of it. And that's where I think being a wise counselor and a leader in that lawyer-statesman role helps you transition from just being a lawyer to being a counselor and a business person. Crisis management, frankly, is the best time to show that you're a leader and the best time to expand your influence in the company. A good in-house counselor has to be a communicator. One of the things that we've done at Overstock in our communication is any email which is longer than a paragraph has to start with a 1 or 2 sentence bluff statement. Bluff is B-L-U-F. It stands for bottom line up front. It's a military term. And I have found that to be extraordinarily useful, one, as a lawyer who generally wants to write and say too much because I want to make sure everything is covered, every I is dotted and T is crossed, and A is covered. All of those things make for long writing. No one wants to read that. A bottom line up front gives a 1 or 2 sentence recommendation on what to do. It creates crisp communication. As president of the company and now as chairman of the company, I love a bluff statement. If I get the email from our president with a bluff statement and I agree with the 2 lines, I don't have to spend reading 4 pages of a memo after that. I will, but I can read through it faster. Being an effective communicator is important. I also think we have to pound out of us the legalese. That will be a real hurdle to transitioning from a lawyer to a business person. How do I do that? In my introduction, it mentioned I have 5 sons. 5 sons means a lot of dirty crew socks and a few holes in the drywall at our house. But it also means a chance to try and explain things so that they can understand them. For about a decade ago, I was going to Washington, D.C. or New York just about every week fighting a form of market manipulation called naked short selling. Much sexier than it sounds, or much less sexy than it sounds. Anything with naked in it should sound more sexy than naked short selling is. I got that backwards, trying to show what a good communicator I am. That's foolish. But I would talk to my boys and I would say, I'm going to meet with the chairman of the SEC. And they'd say, what are you going to talk about? And I would talk about naked short selling. And I knew that if my sons couldn't understand it, then staffers on the Hill couldn't understand it. And frankly, they gave me some great ideas about how to communicate more clearly. I love to try my arguments out around the dinner table. I think that helps you become a good communicator. Anyone who's a good communicator can be a good business person. Communication is crucial. The next skill that's important for in-house counsel practice that I think goes into being a good business person is to be a questioner. So I mentioned when I became the president of the company, I wasn't an expert in all of these things. And if you asked our chief merchandising officer or our chief marketing officer or chief technologist, what was it like to report to Jonathan? I think they would say a few things. One, they would say, boy, he gave me a long leash. He gave me a lot of autonomy, and he let me do what I thought was best. But very quickly, they would also say, and I never had a one-on-one where I didn't feel like I was getting cross-examined in the witness chair. Now, I wasn't trying to make them feel that way, but I need to know why. And I think learning to think like a lawyer teaches you to need to know why. So when my chief merchant would answer a question, well, that's just the way it's done in the retail business, that didn't work for me. I would say, why is it done that way in the retail business? And sometimes the answer would be, well, I don't know. And I would say, when we meet here next Wednesday at 3 o'clock at our standard time, please tell me why. Being a good questioner helps you understand things and then become a better problem solver. The move to business. Are you willing to give up the law? I think that's the first question you have to ask. If you say, I love the law and I love being a lawyer, then I think you should continue to love the law and continue to be a lawyer. But I think it's something that can be given up and you still have your identity. And it's still part of who you are. The next thing, and I hope what I've talked about has shown this, but your skills will transfer well. They'll transfer well to business. You may think, but how's being a litigator going to help me run a business? All these things we've talked about transfer well. But you're going to need to recalibrate your risk level. If you're always taking the safest path, it won't work. One of the things I quickly learned at Overstock as the general counsel was, if it was a question between legal and illegal, even in our kind of cowboy culture at Overstock, our entrepreneur startup culture at Overstock, we were always going to choose legal. That was never, ever a question. But if it was a question between conventional and unconventional thinking, I would put my chips on unconventional every time. There's nothing wrong with doing the unconventional, with doing the innovative, unless it's illegal. But those bounds are very different, and don't confuse the two of them. Avoid legalese. I've talked about being a good communicator. So the question is how to do it. I have so many lawyers come to me and say, how did you transition from being a lawyer, keeping track of your life in 6-minute increments on a timesheet, to running a publicly traded company that sells toasters and 800 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets? And a couple things. One, volunteer to captain projects. Volunteer to do things that you're not necessarily comfortable doing. I'll give you an example. I joined Overstock as the general counsel. A request for proposal came across my desk from Palm, of Palm Pilots, back in 2000. Even back in 2002, they had Overstock product. They probably don't have any product today, but it came across. They had been liquidating all of their returns on eBay, and they weren't pleased with the return on investment they were getting. And so they were doing a request for proposal among liquidators, and it came across my desk because it had a 2-page contract that had to be marked up as part of the request for proposal. But as I read through the entire request, I said, wait a second. This has a merchandising aspect. It has a warehouse aspect. We had to test all the return product before we could resell it. It's got a marketing aspect. It's got an IT aspect. There is nobody at this company who's a natural captain for this project. So, RFP in hand, I marched into the CEO's office and I said, Patrick, this is a really neat opportunity where we can grow our business. We need to win this RFP. Let me captain the project. And he looked at me and he goes, but you're the lawyer. And I said, but I can do this. And he goes, okay, we need some adult supervision on this project. I was an adult, I guess. That's the stature that having a law degree came with. And so we took on that project. We won the RFP. We're in a bake-off with eBay. We pounded eBay, and we started becoming the main liquidator for Palm's Return. As soon as that happened, I became the third member of the executive team. Volunteering to captain something, your skills are good enough to help you do that. That's one way to make a transition. The second way, and I think this is true no matter how you want to succeed in business, is make your boss's life easier. My best employees, the ones I like the most, are the ones that make my life easier. That doesn't mean they hide problems from me. In fact, I want them to find problems and bring them to me. But when they bring them to me, they make my life easier by bringing them with a proposed solution. When I joined Overstock, I like to joke with Patrick. He signed me to review non-disclosure agreements and sit in a broom closet and stay out of the way. He didn't really want a lawyer infringing on the way the company was doing business. But I said, look, I'll do whatever you want. I know I'm going to succeed at this company, but I do want to do one thing. I want to be the corporate secretary. I want to take the minutes at board meetings. I want to put the packet together that gets sent to the board. And he looked at me and he goes, you want to do that? It's all yours. And the guy who was doing it didn't want to do it. Volunteer for projects, particularly ones that make someone else's life easier. That was one of the best things I did. I've sat in every board meeting Overstock's ever had. I've gone from being the corporate secretary sitting in a broom closet to chairman of the board. That wouldn't have happened had I not volunteered to do some scuttle work and make someone's life easier. That's how I think you make a transition from being a lawyer to joining the business. So there's a little over half an hour. Probably talked too long. I'd love to answer questions about what I've said, about Overstock, about anything at all. Tell me your name. Darren, nice to meet you.
So my question is, do you think there's like a certain timing that you have to do to make the jump from being a lawyer to in-house, or do you think you're harmed if you go straight from law school to in-house? I'm just curious about the timing you think what's best there.
I'm biased. I think the way I did it is best, but I don't think there's one right answer. I do think if you've spent 3 years going to law school and a painful summer studying for the bar and passing the bar, that you're better served by practicing law for some time. And the things that I learned practicing law, like that story with the Japanese businessman, and there's lots of others, I think helped me better understand business. It also gave me enough of a background that when I went in-house, one thing I'll tell you about going in-house, at a law firm, I don't care how deep and how knowledgeable I was in any issue, I always felt like there was someone at the firm who knew more about it than me. These big 100, 500 to 1,000 person firms. When I went in-house, there were 2 lawyers. And there wasn't any issue, any legal issue that I didn't know more we knew more than everyone else in the building about these issues. So if you're going to know more than everyone else, you have to know at least enough to keep people out of trouble. So I think spending some time is important. But I think it's really opportunistic. When the chance comes, you have to jump at it. Tell me your name.
Kent.
Hi, Kent.
How you doing? Hey, when are you going to be in your new building?
Our new building, we're building we'll be in there next August. We're building a 19-acre campus in Midvale. Everything at Overstock has the O in it. And this building, round. Round as can be. And we call it the Peace Coliseum. From the outside, it's this cement building with punched glass windows. It looks menacing and like the Coliseum. But when you fly over it, and it just happens to be on the southern flight path to the airport, there's a grass park in the middle and an atrium in the middle of that. And the walkways form a peace sign. So From the outside, it's rough and tumble, hard scrabble business, but once you're in, it's one love. We're all together, a collaborative business. Patrick likes to say it represents the duality of man. August, it's on time, it's on budget. I have a bet with Patrick on the over. If it's over, he has to give me $100. If it's under, I will spend the best $100 of my life. Give it to him. So, thanks. Yes, tell me your name.
Virginia Lee, why do you want to be governor?
I guess I am applying for a job. So, thank you, Virginia. I don't like career politicians. I think that they focus too much on winning the next election, and that means they don't make hard decisions. I think there are hard decisions that need to be made in Utah, some of which, all of which won't be popular with some segment of the population. Whether it's getting our air cleaner along the Wasatch Front. Thank you. I'm not used to people clapping, but if you want to clap, I think having clean air is awesome. Getting our air cleaner, that will involve things that will make segments of society upset, but it can be done. I think education in Utah needs to be better. And if we continue to have the same old people look at the same old problems, you know what we're going to get? The same old results. If we nibble around the edges, we will not have transformative improvements. I am sure some of the things that I would like to do will make people upset, but I think trying new things is the only way to do it. And then the third thing I would say is I think we're far too reliant on the federal government. We practice and we preach self-reliance as a people and as families, and yet a quarter of our budget growing comes from the federal government. And I think that's dangerous, particularly as the federal government amasses larger and larger debt. I do think this. I think the quality of leaders that we hire or elect determines the quality of government that we get. And I'm made tough choices at Overstock. We failed on a lot of things. We failure fast. We've succeeded on a lot of things. Those are the kind of perspectives that I hope to bring to the State House. But thanks for asking the question. Yes, remind me of your name. We had lunch, but I forgot.
Daniel Gardner.
Daniel.
You kind of alluded to this, but how important was, you got a good education, but when you left school, how important was the experience, the miles that you tracked to lead you down a successful road?
Well, the question is how important is the experience post-education to get to where I'm. I think it's crucial. I think you can't stop being a learner when you get your sheepskin. People, a lot of times students will say, what's the one thing I can do to succeed? And I usually say, make your boss's life easier. But the second thing I say is read. Read all the time. I make a goal to read 12 books a year. I keep a spreadsheet. Because I keep a spreadsheet, I usually get to 12. If I didn't keep a spreadsheet, I think I'd get to 3. The other thing I do is I read the paper every day. And what parts of the paper I read have changed over time. You know, when I was a kid, it was the comics and the sports page. It's the business page. Even when I was practicing law, I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I read the opinion pages every day. I think news is the lingua franca of business and so much more. And so I think that's important. But I think being a learner is crucial. Richard.
What's your vision for Overstock going forward?
So Overstock, what's the vision for Overstock going forward? One thing I want to say is Overstock has changed in the 16 years it's been in business. Despite our name, we are no longer a liquidator. We used to be last year's goods. We'd buy them from retailers and manufacturers and sell them to consumers. Only about 20% of what we sell now is liquidation goods. The other 80% is first-run, replenishable, brand-named goods. The model has changed in that we used to own all of our inventory, warehouse it. So the year that we did $100 million in sales, our inventory peaked at about $45 million. We now own and warehouse very little of what we sell. It's mostly drop ship suppliers. So that we'll do $1.8 billion in sales this year, and our inventory will peak at about $40 million. We've become a logistics company so that our drop ship providers can put their product in any of our warehouses around the country, and whether they're selling to Overstock customers, their own customers, or heaven forbid an Amazon customer, we will put it in the appropriate box with the appropriate packing slip and ship it out. Our vision our grand vision on the e-commerce side is to make e-commerce o-commerce. We also have a new business that we've got into. As some people will know, we were the first major retailer to accept Bitcoin, which is a currency based on blockchain technology. People say, why do you do that? And I say, well, we're in the business of making it easier for people to spend their money with us. And if the money they want to spend is Bitcoin, we're going to make that easy. But the real magic of Bitcoin is the technology behind it, this blockchain technology, which is really an electronic ledger so that all of the currency, the cryptocurrency can be tracked and monitored. We are now getting into we're turning into a financial technology company on part of our business. We have issued the first crypto bond, so a publicly traded bond with no paper, but it trades like a Bitcoin. We're very close to having blockchain technology that will make sure short selling is done in a proper way and is never done with naked short selling. Our vision in the business is to become o-commerce, but frankly, I'm just as enthused about this financial technology startup that we have, and could be a big deal. Yes? Tell me your name.
I'm Lee.
Lee.
Representative Chaffetz has introduced a bill that calls it something like internet tax parity. Like sales tax or whatever state wishes. So what does that mean for Overstock? Is that something that's going to be very difficult for you to?
Let me start out with, we support Representative Chaffetz's bill, the Retail Parity Tax Act, RTPA is its initials. Let me just give a little history on remote sales tax. So remote sales used to be catalog sales. So if LL Bean lived up in Maine and you bought something from LL Bean and had it delivered to Utah, LL Bean did not have to collect and remit sales tax to the Utah Tax Commission. You, as the consumer in Utah, have a duty to pay a use tax when you file your income tax at the end of the year. Nobody does. The Supreme Court said that unless a company has a physical presence, some kind of nexus in the state can't force that company to be its tax collector. So Overstock collects and remits taxes now in 5 states where we have physical presence. We have long liked that rule, but various states have tried to expand the definition of nexus, and Overstock being kind of a cantankerous litigator, a spend and defend litigator, every law firm's dream client. We've fought those cases and we've won some and lost some, but the states are so aggressive in trying to expand the definition of nexus that we would like Congress, under its interstate commerce powers in the Constitution, to fix this once and for all. There's a bill called the Marketplace Fairness Act that is anything but fair and makes a very unlevel playing field for remote sellers. There's Representative Chaffetz's bill, which is pretty close to fair and close enough that we've told them we'll support it. We hold our nose and swallow and support it. There's another one by Representative Goodlatte in Virginia, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, where instead of saying you have to collect tax at the destination rate, which is what all the other ones say. You collect at the origin rate. So if Overstock in Utah sells something to a customer in Colorado, we would collect the Utah rate, send it to Utah Tax Commissioner, and then at the end of the year say 4% of our sales are in Colorado, and he'd ship it there. 13 years ago, this kind of stuff would have killed our business. It's very hard to do. With 1.5 million products in 10,000 taxing jurisdictions, and where the software was then, it would have killed our business. Today, partly because we're bigger, we can comply. I still think it will hurt a lot of small businesses, including Main Street brick and mortar businesses that do most of their sales on Main Street, but ship some sales remotely because everyone has a website. So I hope that answers the question. Yes. Tell me your name.
Dennis Pearson.
Hi, Dennis.
I was, with the question about sales tax and politics, I was wondering if you have any concern about income inequality. Growing is very well.
Yes. I mean, yes, how can you not answer yes to that question? But I guess is, what does that mean? How do we fix it? And I think the free market fixes it best. One of the things that we do at Overstock is we don't try and just create jobs. We try and create careers. And I'll give you 2 examples. 14 years ago, a woman joined our company as a temporary employee making outbound phone calls, sales calls, without a college degree. She's the president of our company now and sits on our board of directors. We recognize talent, and we try and use those starting jobs to be a pool for careers within the company. Another example is a fellow named Jose Jimenez, was working in our warehouse as a janitor, started taking our ESL classes that we offer, got on the Overstock scholarship to go to SLIC, earned a computer science degree, and is now a developer, software developer in our company. We look at entry-level jobs as not end places for people to be, but starting places for people to come to career. I think that's how the free market helps solve income inequality.
I think in the Republican debate, which I'm a little surprised I was watching, but was interesting. I think that like with sales tax, I know people who are very, very poor taxed by sales tax. I know people who are very, very poor who get taxed by payroll taxes. And also, income tax doesn't apply so much. But one of the things that you could do is you could shift the burdens so that the poorest of the poor aren't being taxed as much as they are by sales tax.
That's a fair point. I think another thing that would change is how we do economic development out of the governor's office. Today, the governor picks winners and losers by giving big tax breaks to companies. And if you look in 2014 and 2015, 36 companies have received tax breaks for the promise of hiring more employees. Overstock is one of them. But 3/4 of those are out-of-state businesses. 1/4 of them are in-state businesses. 100% of them are bigger businesses. They're not small mom-and-pop startup companies. I think rather than giving long 30-year tax credit grants to big corporations, we would do better to take that money and reduce the corporate income tax so that the bed and breakfast in Vernal, the cafe in Panguitch, the small mining operation in Richfield, those companies could hire 1 or 2 or 3 more people. We can't pick winners and losers. The job is to create a level playing field and let people compete on that field. So, yes.
Hi, I'm Larissa.
Hi, Larissa.
I'm interested in going back to the blockchain discussion.
Okay. You're going to scare some people off, but I can go on this all day long.
I was wondering if Overstock is successful with this sort of peer-to-peer stock trading, if it has expanded into some of the other potential applications of the blockchain, like using it for a land registry system, other.
So blockchain technology, peer-to-peer trading, if we're successful in the equity market, do we have intention to expand? The answer is yes. And we had a board meeting just this week where we talked about it. And I think land title is an area that is ripe for that. I think contracting is an area that's ripe for that. I think peer-to-peer technology is huge and can revolutionize the way we do business, and frankly, can cut out the friction cost on a lot of things. Typically, and just to give an example on the business we're in with stock trading, when you buy a share of stock, you pay money for it, and the settlement date is T plus 3, trade plus 3 days. If it doesn't settle in 3 days, that's when it's undelivered and it's a naked short or a naked long. With peer-to-peer blockchain technology behind it, it should be almost instantaneous. So our business, the name of our business in that is T0 because we think it's trade plus 0. But I think that the areas to grow in are enormous. I think fintech is a big area, but when we're out in Silicon Valley talking to the Mark Andreessens and others of the world, there's a lot of greenfield that can be harvested. Thank you for letting me come. It's great to be with you and great to be at the U.